Ethical Perspectives on the News is produced by the Interreligious Council of Linn County, which is solely responsible for its content. The views and opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect those of the staff and management of KCRG TV9.
Good morning. I'm Bob Sessions, Professor of Philosophy at Kirkwood Community College. Welcome to Ethical Perspectives on the News. This morning we'll be discussing the ethical, legal, environmental, and economic aspects of a proposed modification to Iowa's 35-year-old bottle bill. Senate Study Bill 1247 proposes several additions to Iowa's successful long-standing bottle bill. The proposal would extend deposits to plastic water bottles, and it would add 1 cent per bottle for the processing of those plastic water bottles. While this is not a hot-button moral issue, container recycling is a powerful example of how much good can come from very mundane activities such as recycling. This morning we have two panelists who represent groups with varying interests whose voices have been crucial in formulating and implementing our container recycling law. First, to my left is Sherry Cunningham from Pella, Iowa. She drove over here this morning. She's from the Redemption Center in Pella. Thank you, Sherry, for coming.
Thank you.
I hope it was a lovely drive. It's such a beautiful day.
It was a very nice drive.
Yeah. And next to her is Mark Beltrain, who's an attorney from Brown and Winnick in Des Moines, who represents organizations that are favorable to the bottle bill. We wanted to have a representative from the retailers, people like Hy-Vee, who sell and often redeem the bottles, but at the last minute the person representing the Container Association had to drop out. And so we'll have to represent her views this morning in the discussion. Let's first talk a bit about the bill. We've had one for 35 years. It was one of the first in the nation. It really hasn't changed for that length of time. So Mark, maybe you could give us some background on the bill, what's contained in it, how it works, because I think a lot of people don't understand anything except you pay a nickel and you bring it back the next day and get your nickel back.
Sure. Well, good morning and thanks for having us on today. It's a pleasure to be here. The Better Bottle Bill, as we call it, is an effort by a number of organizations to modernize what has, up to this point, been a very successful law for the past 34 years. And as you described in your opening, Bob, it's a bill that, first of all, would expand the number of beverage containers that are eligible for the deposit to additional non-carbonated beverages, water, tea, sports drinks. And we feel that's very important because those were beverages that in 1979, when the bill was signed into law, really didn't exist. And the second thing that it does, as you mentioned, is it allows a doubling of the handling fee. And we think that's very important because redemption centers like Sherry and her colleagues, as well as the retailers, it's been 34 years since that's been addressed, and costs have obviously increased significantly during that period of time.
Well, let's talk for a minute about why we want to have a bottle bill in the first place. Why not do as Hy-Vee wants us to do, for example, and that's just put the containers into the recycling process. Because many cities, like Cedar Rapids and Iowa City, had curbside recycling. A lot of people put various kinds of containers there already. Why not just add the aluminum and plastic and glass bottles that we have? Sherry, you want to respond to that?
Because with the current bottle bill, we have a recycling rate of over 85%. Okay. So 85% of the containers that have the bottle deposit on it get recycled with single stream recycling, which is what Hy-Vee would like to do in your retailers, which is tossing it into the little green container, setting it out at your curb. Only 26% of those containers actually get recycled. So that's 75% of your containers that end up in your landfills, your roadways, your parks. The idea of expanding the bottle bill will include those 500 million containers that aren't serviced by the bottle bill. The design of the bottle bill itself was for land beautification. It's something that everybody keeps forgetting. Without a bottle bill, you know, a lot of the containers are going to be left by the roadsides in the parks. You can't use single stream recycling along the road. Where would you put your containers?
Sure. Well, let's suppose, though, for a minute that we got 85% of the bottles that went into the landfill. Okay, they didn't just get thrown along the roadside. So you've got an equality there. Is there any advantage to having bottles recycled through the stream that we're using now with a bottle bill, or just put into the landfill? Why would you want to do the former rather than the latter?
The cleanliness of the containers that come into the redemption centers, that states that have bottle bill programs such as ours, the containers are cleaner, so companies like Mark represents are demanding the products that come, the recycled containers that come from Iowa. When you do single stream recycling, it all gets mixed together, so chances that little pieces of paper or little pieces of plastic get mixed in together, well, those containers aren't recycled. Of the 26% that get recycled, only 40% can be used because of breakage or contamination. So, you know, the 85%, it's recycled, it's reused.
I'm a recycler. We do a lot of traveling in the West, and many Western states, Dakotas, Montana, Wyoming, and so on, don't do recycling, or they recycle just a few things. And they often tell us when we ask, okay, we don't want to throw this away, can we recycle it? Well, we don't have any demand for this. We can't make any money with these glass bottles and so on. Mark, can you speak to that?
Sure, Bob. And just to first of all build on what Sherry was just saying, the quality of the material, of the raw materials that are collected in states that have the bottle bill, whether we're talking about the glass, the aluminum, or the plastic, PET plastic that are collected, are substantially higher quality in states that have the bottle bill as opposed to the states that don't, including the Western states that you referenced. But at the end of the day, what we're interested in is a system that is fair to consumers, fair to retailers, fair to distributors, and to specifically answer your question, Bob, the clients that we work with can't get enough of this material.
Can you give examples of those?
I sure
those
can.
Clients? You know, what are they doing with the glass and the plastic and so on that we recycle?
Sure. Well, a company, I'll give you an example. Amcor is a PET plastic manufacturing company that has a plant in Ames. They can't get enough PET plastic. They have to bring it from other parts of the country. What they're doing is they're recycling it, they're reconstituting it because it's more economical to reconstitute recycled materials than to start with an original drop of oil. Oil is the primary base of PET plastic, or in the case of glass,
So
sand.
they
and
make
other
more plastic or glass products from the recycled material.
They certainly do, and they make it more economical.
And
And by doing so, it's more economical for everyone in the distribution and consumption chain.
Well, Sherry, one of the complaints or concerns that companies like Hy-Vee have is about contamination. You know, they're having these places where dirty bottles and cans and so on come into the front of their stores, and they're concerned about the dirt. You know, people go in there and then they walk into the store carrying spilled things from the floor and so on. Why wouldn't we want to have everybody have redemption centers? Why would Hy-Vee just as soon do away with the bottle bill rather than have to deal with these dirty bottles and cans?
Restate your question. I had to think. It's built into the law that the containers must be reasonably clean and dry. When customers come into my business, I've been there 13 years. I've owned a redemption center for 13 years. It's a rule. Your containers must be clean. Granted, they all don't need to be washed and sanitized or anything like that, but drained so that there's not liquid dripping out of them. That's part of the law. If grocery stores and retailers are not requiring their customers to have clean containers, then maybe they should be chastised for not following the letter of the law. stop by my redemption center. You know, people say this is one of the cleanest ones in the state. You know, a little bit of scrubbing, and you know that all goes away. They have sanitary napkins when you walk up to your cart to sanitize your your cart. Sure. You know, provide that by your can redemption area. No grocery store has ever been in violation of the state codes for the cleanliness in their redemption center area.
Yeah. But they're not required to do the recycling at their store, right?
No.
The redeeming. Okay, so why do they do it? Why don't they just turn it over to redemption centers?
Because if Hy-Vee on this side of town redeems containers, then possibly Fairway on the other side of town wants to offer that same service to their customers. If more grocery stores supported their redemption centers, then they wouldn't have to worry about those containers in their stores. With the addition of the new bottle bills, we will get a 1 cent increase in our handling fee. Right now we have 79 redemption centers. When the bottle first began, there was over 300 of them. With that increased penny, there will be more redemption centers and more places for people to take those containers, and therefore keeping them out of grocery stores. It also gives me the funding to pick up more often from grocery stores and, you know, alleviate them of some of their responsibility of handling the containers in their stores.
Bob, I'd like to take
sure,
a swing
please.
at that pitch
Please,
real quick, if I may. I'll buy that argument the second that the grocery stores stop accepting dry cleaning, stop accepting drug doctors, stop inviting people that are ill to go into pharmacies that are located in the grocery stores. The fact of the matter is, the grocery stores invite folks and invite filth into their stores every day and profit from it. So it's a little bit disingenuous, I would suggest, to say that we need to get rid of the cans and bottles, many of which, I might add, are now being collected by automated systems that are located on the outside of stores. So I think that's an important thing to note here as well. And
So mainly they do it, you're saying, because they want to attract customers. They don't want to lose customers to someone else. Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's talk for a minute about the new bill. Many states now have bottle bills, and many of them are paying 10 cents, not 5 cents. I mean, you know, 35 years ago, a nickel was worth something. Not worth much now. We're talking about getting rid of the penny and so on. To be honest, one of the things that a bottle bill is doing is providing income for homeless people. We have a lot of people in Iowa City and Cedar Rapids, for example, who make their living, in a sense, off of cans and bottles. 10 cents would help them. Sure. Why not have 10 cents? It would give people more incentive to recycle more, okay, to bring more of them back, maybe 90% rather than 85. And why not give 3 cents or 4 cents to the redemption centers? Why just a penny? Why are they holding it so low? I don't understand the economics of this.
Well,
in an ideal world, we could do that. We've been trying for 10 years, 20 years to change the law, and the law has to be changed through the legislators. And you know,
sure, I understand, but why is the
steps.
Legislators? Why are they dragging their feet? Why don't they just go for the 10 cents and the 3 cent?
Because I'm a redemption center and I make $50,000 a year, and I can't lobby to the tune of $500,000 to keep the bottle bill stagnated and to keep it from changing and developing into something that would provide for an 85% recycling rate. That's my personal opinion.
I think that's largely right, and I might just build on that in saying that I think a lot of it, Bob, is a perception issue. More than anything, and in politics, as we all know, perceptions are very difficult to sometimes get your arms around, even in the face of unmistakable facts. So I think that's the biggest thing we're fighting in that regard.
If the bottle bill happened to be on a ballot and you saw it and it said, let's change the bottle bill to include these things, people would say, hey, that's a great idea. But right now our legislators have health care, which you discussed recently, as a big issue, homelessness. You know, those things are huge. Saving our planet, saving Iowa from bottle bill, you know, islands is not as much of a priority. So we kind of get pushed to the backside. You know, every plastic container takes hundreds of years to go away in our
Deteriorate, sure.
our land mass. You know, today we don't want to think about that. Let's, you know, I don't want to brush it off on my children and my grandchildren. But you know, people like me and Mark are forefront trying to do this, and we're a minority in the state, and we have very few dollars to push forth.
But I'm trying to represent, you know, the retailer's point of view. Okay, why would they be against 10-cent bottles, and why would they be against 3 cents or 5 cents or whatever redemption? Because they're doing both sides of it. In the case of Hy-Vee, for example, they'd get more money back from doing the processing, so they could plow that into better facilities, more workers, and so on. I think right now they're in the same boat you are with that 1 cent.
Sure.
They're having to stretch their resources.
But when you look at the profits of grocery stores and convenience centers, where you know their markup is 50% on an item, you know our markup is a penny or 2 pennies or 3 pennies. That's not 50%. So we're, you know, they're not in the business of making money that way.
But why do they want to squeeze you? I'm still trying to figure out the logic of their position.
Squeeze redemption centers?
Yeah,
because
to go from 300 to 79 or whatever that number is.
Because if you eventually squeeze out all the redemption centers, then eventually people are going to say it's inconvenient for me to muddle through the grocery stores to take my cans. I get people with 1,500 cans at a time come in. Can you imagine them standing outside of Hy-Vee pushing them one at a time?
Okay.
You know, if they can close down all the redemption centers, then they can eventually say, why do we want a bottle bill? It's inconvenient. And then we make the bottle bill disappear, and then they have no responsibilities. The distributors have no responsibilities, and we're back to square one where we were in 1979 with land that is cluttered with plastic and aluminum that nobody wants to pick up because, you know, the homeless people don't need it. I don't need it. It's not making me money. And
Yeah, exactly. The real squeeze, if you will, to use your term, and I think that's a good term to use, is exactly what Sherry mentioned. If the bottle bill doesn't have redemption centers, it doesn't work. And so, as Sherry mentioned, when the bottle bill came out in 1979, we had over 300 redemption centers. Now there are around 75. And so that's a perfectly good way, long term anyway, to starve out the system. Why? Is another question you raised. Well, I think in a lot of respects, the retailers want to have their cake and eat it too. They want to be able to have folks come through their doors to return their containers and buy a lottery ticket or a pack of cigarettes or a candy bar, or to, you know, stop at the Chinese Express or do their grocery shopping. But at the same time, they don't want to have the mandate. And that has been a real sore spot since 1979. After all, a lot of businesses aren't told by the government that you have to do this. And this is admittedly a very unique system. Not every state has it. Not every business is subjected to it.
Yeah. Mark, you told me something before we started the program that I didn't know, and that's that each of those cans goes back to the specific producer. So the Pepsi cans go to Pepsi, and the Coke cans go to Coke, and so on.
Right.
And so that system, you say, has been working fairly well, but clearly it does create some difficulties, a lot of processing fees. So the nickel goes to Pepsi, okay, and then when you take the bottle to Pepsi, or when Hy-Vee takes it to Pepsi, they give you the nickel back, right?
plus the penny.
Plus the penny, okay,
Sure.
that you make. So it's to their advantage to not have recycling happen, right? Because
To
well,
the distributors?
actually, the distributors, they make money, though, because only 85% of them come back.
Well, yeah, if I may,
Right?
you're absolutely right, Bob. The distributors not only make money, they make a filthy amount of money, a lot of money. In fact, under the current system, so the system without the bill that we're talking about to expand it, they make $19 million a year. Expanding it, they'll make $25 million a year.
The distributors.
The distributors. Because, and they make that in a couple of different ways. One way is every time a consumer doesn't return their container, that they get to keep, because they've already paid, they've already been paid rather, for it. So they're making 5 cents every time. And then the second way is on the raw materials, as we talked about earlier. And it's a volume business. So you take, the sum of all of the containers statewide, and that's how you end up with 19 million or 25 in expansion. And that's a number that's been verified by Professor Dermot Hayes at Iowa State University, as well as the Container Recycling Institute. So these aren't, this isn't fuzzy math, if you will. These are real numbers.
So the companies that you represent, for example, the glass company, they get their clean glass from Iowa Recycling by going to the company, Pepsi or whoever has that glass. You got the glass back?
Go ahead.
So it's a lot of change, a lot of travel.
A lot of times it ends up with like Pepsi or my Budweiser, all my beer companies contract through a third-party business such as Container Recovery out of Des Moines. So all the product goes to that one location, and then that location is who contracts with these companies. So even though Budweiser, Miller, Coors, the liquor stores, the state of Iowa gets the nickel, they contract with this company comes and picks up all my containers, and then they in turn sell it to his companies. Okay. So for the most part, they pick us up, but then they all end up in one generalized location and then get sent to him. So
there's no question, Bob, there are a lot of steps, but there are a lot of steps on single stream as well.
Yeah.
I mean, the containers don't just magically fly out of a person's green bin into the melting pots of the manufacturers that are reconstituting the materials. And so there's no question about it, but the system works. You can't argue, and you don't see, frankly, the grocers or the other retail outlets that are opposed. You don't see them arguing the numbers. The numbers are pretty incontrovertible. And you have, in upwards of 86% of containers that go through the system that are being returned, compared to 26%, that go through the other system.
Surely that would go up if we went to 10 cents, for example.
Definitely.
Sure, I think that's right. That goes to follow.
So it seems to me from an ecological point of view, a beautification point of view, that would be a good step. But let me ask a question to sort of get us into a different angle. How we would change the system. You're saying it's working and so on, but one of the images I have, and that's why I was asking that last set of questions, is that not only do these bottles and cans and so on travel a long ways, use a lot of mileage, a lot of fossil fuels and tires and roads and so on to go from the plant to the retailer. But then in the recycling process, these empty cans and bottles, are going, because in order for you to get your nickel, you got to give them a real container. You can't give them a bunch of glass or a bunch of metal. They have to have a particular container they can count so you can get your nickel. Isn't there a better way to do this so we don't have all this excess travel and handling that goes on?
I would say allow your redemption centers to pull it in, not sort by company, but pull it in and then contract with your container recovery type businesses where it's one step here, there, and then to him. Take that 15% that's not being redeemed, put it back into state programs, fix our roads, fix our, clean up our lakes and roadways.
It could be used in a lot of ways.
It could be used,
right. Because right now the state doesn't make anything on this, right?
No, it is a self-funded program, which is an ideal philosophy behind our recycling program. Single stream recycling, you're going to have to, and I'm going to say tax the consumer. In Pella, I pay $5 to $7 additional on my city bill so that I can have curbside single stream recycling. We do it within the city limits of Pella. We don't do it outside of the city limits because it's not cost effective. If we were to change from a bottle bill to single stream recycling, states like Delaware said that it would cost anywhere from $5 to $10 per customer per month to have single stream recycling. I think of, we drink these kind of beverages in my household, but my neighbor lady who's in her 80s doesn't drink anything like that. Why should she be charged $5 to $10 a month to pay for single stream recycling when she doesn't utilize, reap the rewards of it? It's a program where, it's kind of a pay-as-you-go system. I pay the nickel, I get it back,
Well, Mark, you mentioned that you think the system's working pretty well, but how would you change it if you could deal with the issues I'm trying to deal with, the ecological, the handling issues and so on? Because one of the main complaints Hy-Vee seems to have is that there's so much handling involved, okay?
I think technology is slowly changing it already. And there's no question about that. And automation with the machines that are going in, what they call RVM, reverse vending machines that are going in at stores, that's changing it dramatically and making it more efficient to collect, sort, and push out this volume of containers. The key point, though, Bob, is whatever system you have, when you put an economic incentive on the practice of redemption, it's going to increase the efficiency and return. It's just basic human interest. And as you mentioned earlier, you're an avid recycler because you have a conservation ethic. I am too. But there are a lot of folks that may not necessarily have that conservation ethic. And that's the beauty of the deposit, is by putting that on there, you put a larger incentive on the person who is the consumer, and alternatively, the very folks that you were referencing earlier, folks that may not be the consumer, but maybe they're folks that are homeless, maybe they're charities.
Soccer teams,
Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, churches, YMCAs that want to raise money in addition to the bake sales and contribution drives they have. So
Humane societies.
Yeah, the
it's
web,
endless.
Yeah,
How many?
absolutely. The web of all of that really is, I think, the real story here and why you have 86% return rate, that economic incentive.
Well, you folks have convinced me that it's a good bill that we do have, but it could be improved. As times change, not just for ecological and aesthetic reasons, but for economic reasons. It would make a lot of sense, not only for redemption centers and for companies like you represent, but also for the retailers, both the producers and for the retailers. Am I getting something wrong? Am I missing something here?
No, I think you've got it quite well. And frankly, expansion, what we're talking about, would create 500 million new recycling opportunities a year, 500 million new containers that are otherwise going to the landfills or being left at our roadsides or in our fields.
So you're really saying there'll be more jobs as well, which is a big pushing point.
Absolutely.
I have 5 people working for me. I believe I could hire 3 to 4, possibly 5 more to my business. And I'm a smaller redemption center. There are very large ones. One's right here, the Can Shed in Cedar Rapids has 40 employees. I can't imagine how many, he couldn't be here today, but I can't imagine how many more employees Troy could hire if he were, we were to expand the bottle.
That's really
bill.
important. We should have mentioned that before. Well, we are out of time, but I really appreciate you, Sherry, and you, Mark, coming all the way from Des Moines and from Perry to join us this morning. It's a very interesting topic and seems simple, but it's something that I think we could all benefit if we change the law. Thank you.
Exactly.
We appreciate it. Thank you.
We would like everybody to contact their state senators and ask them to change the bottle bill.
Yeah. All right.